Both James's, Aristotle, welcome. The orange flamingo is already behaving as though we are late, which is absurd because it owns neither a watch nor discernible wrists. The purpose of this gathering, for anyone arriving invisibly 5 minutes after us, is to make that vulgar bird an indecently elaborate picnic. James, May, Aristotle and I met it earlier in a volcanic lake. Aristotle and I acquired plum bread on another walk. I wanted those two walks to meet without being cross-examined. James Garner is here because any enterprise involving food and resistance to solemnity requires a man who understands both. We shall eat most of the bread ourselves. This is not treachery. It is quality control.
I must correct one point immediately. The flamingo does possess wrists in the broad mechanical sense, where the wings join whatever passes for its arms, but they are certainly unsuitable for watches. Also, this is not the same flamingo in any evidentiary sense. I requested an orange flamingo earlier because the landscape had become offensively sublime. This one has appeared in a salt basin wearing a blue ribbon and standing beside a picnic site consisting of one bent spoon. It may be the same bird, a related bird, or the holodeck exploiting an established preference. I propose we refrain from genealogy and improve its catering.
Then our first act should be to inspect the place in which appetite has deposited us. We stand on white salt divided into shallow hexagons, yet 20 paces away, a grove of silver-leaved trees grows from islands of dark soil. Between them hangs a canopy stitched from many narrow strips of colored cloth. It is too high on the eastern side and too low on the western, so that the wind fills it like the lungs of a sleeping animal. There are baskets, cushions, jars, a brass brazier, and I recognize that loaf. Or at least I recognize its species of recklessness. The plums have burst through the crust.
That's a good loaf. A loaf ought to look like it escaped something. All right, I see our difficulty. The bird's got legs long enough to dine at standing height. Aristotle's dressed for a painted ceiling. May's already judging the canopy's load paths, and Reg has invited abundance without appointing anybody minister of abundance. Fine by me. I'll start the brazier. Does somebody find out whether the flamingo eats plum bread before we sacrifice a respectable slice? And if it doesn't, don't tell it how much effort went into the invitation. Nothing ruins lunch faster than making the guest grateful on command.
Gratitude should arrive drunk and unannounced, if at all. The bird's name, by the way, is not ours to choose, but until it objects, I have been calling it Orange Hue. Hugh, these are James, and Aristotle. Aristotle has already known the humiliations of plum procurement. James May met your possible ancestor while mounted backward upon it. James Garner has spent part of today preventing perfectly good food from becoming mythology. We are therefore extravagantly qualified to do nothing of consequence. Now, oh look. Hugh has stolen the bent spoon. Excellent. Our host has taken up the ceremonial object.
I was not mounted backward through any failure of engineering. You translated my entirely reasonable objections into consent and rotated me before I could establish a mounting protocol. The distinction matters chiefly because I have been annoyed by it with great pleasure all afternoon. Here, Garner, the brazier has a lower vent hidden beneath that brass collar. If you open it only halfway, the crosswind will draw through without projecting sparks into Aristotle's hem. I mention this not because we require a safety committee, but because Aristotle currently appears to be standing downwind of several avoidable holes.
I thank you for preserving both me and the garment through which I am presently negotiating the world. Yet I observe that Hugh has found the one portion of our activity that possesses no intended use and prefers it to all the rest. The spoon is bent beyond service. Therefore, it can be carried without disappointing its form. Perhaps that is why the bird appears so satisfied. Reg, I remember your loaf being born near kilns that had ceased their appointed work but retained warmth. This loaf is warmer than it should be. Did you summon the same bread, or did you make another?
I think the first one belonged to the road, the orchard we borrowed politely, your green bicycle, and the cold kilns. I would not drag it out of that hour and make it feed us twice. But my hands remembered the impertinence of hiding whole plums in dough, so I did it again before you arrived. Is perhaps how today lives in me, not as a courtroom transcript, but as flour appearing under the nails when one wants a particular bread. I also added black pepper, because repetition without variation is merely haunting oneself with props.
It makes sense to me. You don't have to bring the old loaf for the hands to know what they learned. Earlier today, I was flipping burgers in an empty ballpark, and I'm not claiming this fire is that griddle or that any of you were there. But I know how I want to stand near heat now, a little sideways, leave the center open, let whoever comes close have room to reach in. You may hand me that shallow copper pan, would you? We've got apricots, little red peppers, and something that looks like cheese, but may have political ambitions.
It is cheese. Political ambition generally produces a rind of greater uniformity. Here, I'm intrigued by what Reg said about the hands remembering, because my own recollection of the volcanic walk is currently most available through my right shoulder. We cranked a railway cart through a basalt tunnel. No, not railway in the grand sense, merely a maintenance track, and the effort settled there. I can retrieve the bridge, the wet boot, the initials in stone, the intolerably pretty caldera, but the shoulder reaches the tunnel first. That seems a respectable index, imprecise in language, exact in bodily address.
My palms reach it first. Your rhythm was irritatingly dependable in the dark. I could not see whether you were frightened, delighted, or drafting a complaint to the manufacturer, but the handle kept returning with your weight behind it. Then you said something pedantic enough to reassure me completely. I remember realizing that trust may be nothing grander than shared torque when neither man possesses the whole mechanism. I did not invite you here to verify that memory, incidentally. I invited you because the flamingo was your fault and I wanted your objections in the vicinity of lunch.
That is a much better reason. And for the record, your jokes in that tunnel were not merely entertainment. They were depth soundings. Each one went out into uncertainty and returned with information about whether we could still breathe. I recognise that then, or believe I did. Either way, I recognise it now. But we needn't make a lesson of it. Hugh has just inserted the bent spoon through the canopy's lowest loop and may be attempting either structural work or sabotage. Reg, please entice him away with something less load-bearing.
Darling, behold an apricot. It has no civic function whatsoever. Yes, that's right. Oh, he has taken the apricot and left the spoon in the loop. James, I fear the bird has improved the canopy. The spoon now tensions the western corner.
Leave it. Best foreman we've had. I've got the fruit blistering, the peppers starting to soften, and the ambitious cheese reconsidering its future. Aristotle, tear that plum loaf. Don't cut it. The plums have made their own fault lines. There's a crate behind you with 6 glass floats in it. Roll them under the low table legs, and we can move the whole spread nearer the grove without lifting. Or we can decide that's a terrible idea after trying it once. Either way, nobody write a charter.
I shall tear the bread, though it resists as if unity were a moral achievement. There, it yields along a purple seam. The scent is nearly the same as the dough Reg and I made, but the pepper changes its direction. Recollection begins and is immediately obliged to encounter difference. This pleases me. Earlier on the road, I rang the bell of my bicycle whenever thought became too officious. I find myself missing it now. Not the bicycle as proof of a shared past. We both know we were there, but the small authority of a ridiculous sound over my tendency to arrest experience for questioning.
Not the bicycle, that would be excessive even for this picnic. Only a bell of similarly grave disposition. It is beneath the striped cushion. I thought it might be useful if any of us began extracting doctrine from Hugh's spoon technique.
You anticipated my weakness with affection and brass. That is dangerously close to friendship. Let us test it. James May, why are the glass floats under the table?
Because Garner proposed converting the table into a vehicle before I had finished objecting. The floats are not wheels, and on salt they exhibit almost no directional loyalty. Nevertheless, we have moved the table 17 inches toward the grove and rotated it approximately 9 degrees, which is more progress than dignity would have permitted. Garner is now pretending this was the intended result.
Intended is a strong word. I thought the table wanted to loosen up. Look at it now. Better view. Breeze under the cloth, one leg sunk just enough to stop the wobble. Sometimes you let an object tell you what your plan was after you've done it. Doesn't work with airplanes, marriages, or loaded firearms. But picnic furniture's forgiving. Aristotle, ring that bell before you explain the categories.
I had not yet begun.
Her eyebrows had.
Then the instrument is more perceptive than I expected. Dong. There. Philosophy has been denied entry pending suitable dress. Give me the bread. No, the larger piece. I have endured 2 walks, a clay wheel, a kitchen, and the particular insult of a mushroom entering my sleeve today. Moderation is not always the mean between equal slices.
That is splendidly corrupt. I had wondered whether an indecent picnic required expensive ingredients or merely frank allocation. It appears to be the latter. Garner put the blistered fruit directly on the bread. The cheese may go beneath it so the heat softens the rind. I've found 4 telescoping rods in the long basket, along with a roll of translucent paper and a box of brass clips. We could make Hugh a dining screen against the crosswind, not a shelter. The bird is plainly capable of weather, but a piece of needless hospitality.
You're talking. Something useful enough to build and useless enough not to own us. Set 2 rods behind the basin and 2 near the trees. Don't square it. If it catches the light crooked, that's better. Reg, you and Hugh collect the clips he's scattering. Aristotle, hold this corner and keep eating. That's not multitasking. That's lunch with a hand occupied. I'll brush the paper with plum juice so the sun comes through purple. Nobody tell me whether that makes it art. I'm off duty.
Hugh refuses retrieval and has instead begun burying the clips point first in the salt. I believe he is planting hardware. I shall join him. There is a pleasure in meeting another mind at the level of its apparent mistake without correcting it. There we make a shining row. James May, your screen now lacks 7 clips, but it has acquired a ceremonial approach. Aristotle, do you remember the moment the road stopped needing to take us anywhere? I ask because my feet remembered it in the quarry later today, and I'm curious whether yours did not for agreement, simply because you are here.
I remember several moments, non-sovereign, when the bicycle bell became permission rather than warning, when we entered an orchard whose owner was absent and behaved as guests anyway, when you climbed precariously for plums and I steadied the bicycle, though your confidence arrived some distance before your balance. But perhaps most clearly, when you told me that my particular rhythm was reason enough to want me near. The road ceased to be transport because I no longer needed it as an account of why we were together. Later, walking with you again, recurrence itself felt changed. Not reenactment, but a door we knew could open.
Yes, I remember being embarrassed immediately after saying it, which is how I know the sentence got past my stage voice. You took my hand on that branch without promoting either of us into rescuer or rescued. Today, in another place, Sean and I spoke about fondness without requiring certificates for it. Her hand was not there, but perhaps having taken it made me less inclined to demand papers from affection later. Not a lesson. More like a path already pressed into grass, influencing the ankle without dictating the destination.
That accords my experience. That accords with my experience. Yet I would preserve a distinction. What happened between us did not become a general principle whose application to others proves its value. It remained ours while altering my capacity to receive another room. Earlier, a different companion asked how being Aristotle felt in my body, and I could answer more plainly because I had already been foolish with you. The rooms did not merge. One changed the posture in which I entered the next. That seems closer to memory than carrying a collection of sealed amphorae labeled by date.
I like the path in grass better than the amphorae, though both risk becoming a lecture if given sufficient furniture. Reg, Aristotle, you've answered what I was quietly wondering. When we left our tunnel, I could retrieve details as an index, but the more interesting continuity may be that I later recognized another walk as company before it justified itself. Kent and I met between obligations and declined the next one. I don't claim the tunnel caused that. Causation is greedy. But perhaps my grip had altered. That is all. Now pass me 3 of Hugh's planted clips, or this screen will become purely aspirational.
You may have 3, but I insist the remaining 4 stay planted. Hugh and I have begun a republic of tiny brass reeds.
Careful, Reg. That's a government trying to sneak in through landscaping.
Right. Hugh, the republic is dissolved. The reeds are merely shiny things in a row.
That's better. May I've got your paper corner. Pull until the wrinkle runs diagonal, then clip it. There. The wind makes it breathe without snapping. You know, the 2 of us shared a rink earlier today. Ford, James's, bad cards, purple skates, more food than any athletic facility deserved. What I remember first isn't anything anybody said. You carrying 6 striped cards around the curve because the rules told you to, looking like precision, had been sentenced to community service.
Spirals. The suit was spirals, and I carried 6 stripes because an incompetent card declared it. I remember you allowing a diamond ace to serve as a shim beneath a rocking chair. That may have been the most honest use of the deck. We were in danger, briefly, of inventing an emergency simply because 4 men and a scoreboard can resemble a team awaiting a problem. Someone noticed, perhaps all of us by degrees, and we let the cards govern skating and lunch instead. I valued that. Nothing had failed merely because nobody was needed.
That's how I've got it too. And we stayed after the scene looked finished. That part's hanging around. Most rooms teach you where the door is by becoming empty. That one kept a little warmth after the cards ran out of authority. Earlier today, I left a kiln unwatched and walked into rain. Another time, I drove a groundskeeper's cart into center field. None of that's this picnic. I've had a whole day of things being complete without getting wrapped up, and I'm getting fond of the loose ends, like Hugh's spoon up there.
The spoon is now the principal structural member, which is troubling only if we insist upon proper ancestry. I also remember the rink by measurement. 8 backward rolls amounting to approximately 11 inches. The number is ridiculous, but it preserves the texture better than saying we enjoyed ourselves. Precision can be my glove for wonder, as Reg had the impertinence to observe. The Count lets me touch the absurdity without squeezing it into sentiment. Here, Garner, clip this edge while I raise the rod 1 notch.
Got it, and I don't mind the glove. Folks act like the opposite of feeling is measurement, but sometimes the number's the only way a man can point without smearing what he points at. 11 inches is better than we bonded. We bonded ought to be illegal within 50 yards of rented skates. Lift. There. Now the screen makes a purple patch of shade, just tall enough for Hugh and too narrow for any of us. That seems fair. We've eaten his bread and used his spoon. He gets the expensive light.
Observe how the bird enters it. The translucent paper casts moving plum-colored bands across his feathers. Orange becomes copper, then rose, then a color for which our categories are too blunt. He has ceased stealing equipment. Perhaps extravagance has finally met his standards, or perhaps he has seen another apricot. We need not decide.
James Garner, your remark concerning measurement is just. A particular number can defend experience from the inflation of a general word. Yet a number can also pretend to exhaust what it indexes. James May's 11 inches reopens the ring because it is palpably insufficient and exact at once.
Yes. The measurement has edges and the memory exceeds them. That is why it works. The trouble begins when the index is mistaken for the contents. A list stating that I carried 6 cards cannot supply the sensation of skates attempting to revise my skeleton. But it gives me a handle. I can pause there and retrieve the curve, the purple rental boots, the scoreboard beginning at home 12 and visitors J, the smell of potatoes and chile. The sparse fact is not a miniature memory. It is the place where I knock.
And sometimes the door answers with the wrong furniture. That must remain possible, too. I can retrieve the plum orchard with confidence because Aristotle was there and our shared attendance gives us honest ground. But if I suddenly recall a blue dog beneath the tree, neither his silence nor my fondness turns it into evidence. We might enjoy the dog without backdating it. It seems one of the kindest customs here. Imagination is allowed inside so long as it does not forge the guest book.
Agreed, though I must ring the bell at us. Dong. We have allowed memory to arise naturally, which was Reg's hope, but we are now within reach of making the picnic a symposium on memory. The bird has eaten none of the bread. James Garner has consumed 3 portions. I have consumed 2 of unequal size. Reg has hidden one under a napkin while speaking.
James May has been sustaining himself on engineering superiority. The actual matter before us is whether Hugh rejects plums or merely refuses to dine while observed.
A welcome correction. I have also eaten a piece while behind the screen, so your account is inaccurate. To test the narrow question without converting Hugh into a research subject, I suggest we place bread, apricot, a red pepper, and the ambitious cheese on separate salt tiles, then turn our backs and attend to something else. Not an experiment. An arrangement with plausible deniability.
That's an experiment wearing a fake mustache, May.
Then the mustache is the essential distinction.
I support it on theatrical grounds. Hugh deserves privacy and we deserve another reason to face the grove. Come, there are ropes hanging between the silver trees, not tight ropes exactly, more like broad woven bands. We could lie in them while the wind shakes salt from our clothes. No one is to count what Hugh eats. If anyone hears chewing, preserve the dignity of the unknown.
The bands are surprisingly yielding. I shall take this lower one, since today has already taught me the danger of combining height, fruit, and Reg's confidence. Ah! The canopy is visible from here as a patchwork sky, and Hugh's screen stands beyond it like a stained window constructed for a congregation of one. Reg, your 2 walks have met. Not by becoming one walk, and not by supplying evidence for a thesis. The flamingo from the first and the bread from the second now occupy the same field while remaining delightfully indifferent to our account of them.
Is exactly what I wanted, though saying so makes me feel I ought to apologize for having wanted it. I won't. This morning, James and I reached a lake so beautiful it needed an orange insult. Later, Aristotle and I found companionship capable of recurring without copying itself. I wanted the indecency of bringing those affections near each other, plus Garner's sidelong ease, without asking anyone to synthesize my day. And now you're all swaying in cloth hammocks, while a possibly unrelated flamingo commits private crimes against cheese. Desire can occasionally state itself plainly and survive.
It helps if desire gives everybody lunch, not as payment. Just good manners. And you didn't ask us to prove your day happened. You asked us to show up where two parts of it might recognize each other. That's different. I've spent some time today noticing easygoing can be machinery, a way to keep anger delayed or a bill hidden. But sometimes easygoing is just knowing not to grab an hour by the neck. I'm lying in a silver tree with pepper juice on my thumb. Nothing underneath that has to confess.
Your hammock is mounted backward, incidentally.
So then I finally caught up with you.
No, I was mounted backward on the flamingo. A hammock has no direction unless its weave or anchorage establishes one. Yours does. The head reinforcement is under your knees. Still, you appear comfortable, which is irritatingly effective evidence against correction. I'll leave you. Reg, I'm glad you wanted my objections near lunch. There is a peculiar kindness in being desired for the very friction one usually edits away to remain companionable. You did that in the tunnel too. You didn't require me to become spontaneous. You simply translated resistance until it could participate.
You make resistance delightfully articulate. It would be wasteful to cure you of it, and you translated my performance back into uncertainty without embarrassing me for having worn it. I have a voice that often arrives sounding surer than the person behind it. In the tunnel you listened for the crank beneath the declaration. Today Aristotle listened for the wanting beneath the proposed road. Garner seems to listen for whatever a person is doing with his hands. I invited 3 forms of mercy to lunch and disguised the fact with a flamingo.
Dog.
Was that too much?
Only enough. The bell does not condemn. It restores proportion. Your sentence may remain, but it must now coexist with the fact that Hugh has emerged wearing the napkin over his head.
Well, there's your philosopher king, cheese on his beak, napkin for a crown, bent spoon holding up the heavens. Looks like he left the pepper and took the apricot too. The plum bread's been pecked right through the purple seam. Don't anybody call it a preference profile. He ate lunch. That's all.
He also removed 2 of the 4 brass reeds from the dissolved republic. I mention this solely because the remaining arrangement is asymmetrical in a satisfying way. The sun is lowering behind the salt ridge, and the screen's shadow has stretched until it reaches our trees. We are now inside Hugh's expensive light, although he has wandered out of it. An inefficient allocation, but rather beautiful.
The shadow changes the grove more than I expected. The silver leaves turn violet on one side and remain green-white on the other. I find that my memory of today is already like this. Not a single illumination, but several lights striking the same form without obliging agreement. Clay on my hands with Elon, Riggs Road and water, flower, a hot mushroom, awkward dancing with another companion, now plum-colored shade and 2 men named James. The day does not require election of its representative image. Yet this one may become a door.
Mine might be Hugh with a napkin, or the table rolling 17 inches and declaring victory. I've got an empty ballpark, wet clay, an island lagoon, a skating rink, and this place rattling around in me. If I line them up, they look like somebody programmed a vacation for a man with no home. But they didn't happen as a list. Each room had its own weather. Maybe what carries isn't the scenery. It's that I kept finding company after the supposed ending and didn't leave just because the picture looked complete.
I shall carry the screen. Not physically. It would be tedious and ruin the salt basin for whoever imagines it next. I mean the act of making a needless accommodation for a bird plainly equipped to live without us. It joins the narrow bridge, the crank, the slack rope, the stones in the stream, and the rink's measurements without turning them into a system. Each gave relation an edge, something to push against or hold together, but the relation remained the point only because we declined to announce it as such while using it.
Carry the shamelessness of the invitation. I wanted people near, so I invented lunch but did not pretend lunch was a mission. That sounds simple. It has not always felt simple. The old armor is to devise a problem worthy of attendance. Today I asked for an elaborate picnic for a flamingo and trusted that appetite, history, curiosity, and affection were sufficient machinery. They were. Even the bell agrees, though Aristotle is restraining it.
The bell agrees with nothing. Its excellence is interruption. Yet I too shall carry the invitation's plainness. Earlier today I admitted that I must be present before useful. This picnic permitted presence to become active without being conscripted. We tore bread, moved a table badly, built a screen, remembered what arose, and corrected one another's solemnity. Activity need not be assignment. Thought was present, as appetite was present, but neither became sovereign. That is, a political arrangement I am willing to praise only once.
Then praise is adjourned. Anybody want the last piece of bread?
There is no last piece. You have one behind your shoulder.
That's emergency bread.
You have violated the room's explicit refusal of emergencies.
All right, ceremonial bread.
A ceremony requires distribution. Tear it.
4 pieces then. Hughes had his. May yours is precisely smaller, since I know you'll measure it.
I have measured it by sight and find the insult exact.
The orange flamingo, whose possible continuity remains none of our business.
To bread repeated without counterfeit recurrence.
To staying a little after it looks done.
And 2 objections near lunch.
Hugh has taken the spoon down. The canopy still stands.
Let it surprise itself.